The first round of the 2022 Stanley Cup playoffs is over, and man, to me, that might be the best first round that I have ever seen for as long as I can remember. We had 5 of the 8 first round matchups go the distance, go 7 games, and the only series that ended before Game 6 was Colorado-Nashville, and we kind of all expected that anyways. Just last night alone, we had 2 different Game 7 overtimes. Over the past couple of weeks, we have been absolutely spoiled as hockey fans, especially just this weekend with all the Game 7s. And based off of the results, I think it sets up a pretty incredible second round as well. So in this video, I'm going to do a quick preview for each of the 4 second round matchups and of course, give you guys my predictions. Let's start things off in the Western Conference with the Colorado Avalanche against the St. Louis Blues. Both of these teams pretty well rested, obviously Colorado more so than St. Louis, but neither of these teams had to play a Game 7 in round 1. The St. Louis Blues were able to knock off the Minnesota Wild in 6 games, and obviously Colorado was able to sweep Nashville in 4. This is actually a rematch of last year's first round where Colorado swept St. Louis. Little interesting tidbit about this series, Brendan Saad is actually going to be on the opposite side of it now than he was last year. Obviously he played for Colorado last season, is now a member of the St. Louis Blues. Before we get into my prediction, let's first take a look at some of the stats for each of these teams in the first round of the playoffs. Against Nashville, Colorado averaged 5.25 goals for per game, pretty insane. Just 2.25 goals against per game. As we all know, they dominated. The special teams were clicking as well. 43.8 power play percentage, a 76.9 penalty kill percentage. Cale Makar led Colorado in scoring through those 4 games with 10 points, which is pretty remarkable, about a 2.5 points per game there for Makar, and McKinnon also had 6 points, and I believe Landeskog did as well. And taking a look at the St. Louis Blues now, they scored 3.67 goals per game against the Minnesota Wild in the first round, allowed just 2.67 against. They played fantastic in that series. Their special teams were good as well, a 30.8 power play percentage and an 83.3 penalty kill percentage. Ideally, you want your special teams numbers to add up to be over 100, so like you take your power play percentage and your penalty kill percentage and you add them up, and if it's over 100, you're usually in a pretty good spot, and that is the case with both of these teams after the first round. David Perron led the Blues in scoring in that 6-game series with 9 points, 5 of which being goals, and Ryan O'Reilly also had 5 goals for a total of 8 points. I think this is going to be a good series. These teams really don't like each other. I imagine it's going to be a closer series than it was in last year's first round where Colorado swept St. Louis. I think this year's Blues team is much improved from last year's. I think they're much deeper, especially when you look at their forward core, with the emergence of players like Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou, and even Ivan Barbashev had a breakout season, and then the offseason additions of Brendan Saad and Pavel Buchnevich. Basically what I'm saying is, I don't think this is going to be a cakewalk for Colorado. However, my prediction, I'm going to take the Avalanche still, but I'm going to say it takes them 6 games to get it done. I could see a scenario where maybe we see St. Louis come out and shock the Avalanche and take Game 1 in Colorado, because maybe Colorado comes out flat because they've had so much time off. So again, I think this is going to be a good series, a lot closer than last year's first round, but I do still expect it in the end to be the same result, and that is Colorado moving on. Moving on now to the other Western Conference semifinal matchup, the Battle of Alberta in the playoffs for, I believe, the first time since 1991. Of all the 4 semifinal matchups, this is the one that I am most excited for. I think it's going to be incredible hockey. The intensity should be ridiculous. Obviously, we know how these matchups usually go just in the regular season. These 2 teams absolutely hate each other, so just imagine what it's going to be like with them playing in the second round of the postseason. It's going to be incredible. Let's now take a look at some of the numbers for each of these teams after the first round. They both took 7 games to win their respective series. Calgary defeated Dallas in 7, Game 7 overtime that is, last night with Johnny Gaudreau ending that series, and the Edmonton Oilers defeated the Los Angeles Kings in 7 as well. First, looking at the Oilers, they scored 3.86 goals per game in their first round matchup, only allowed 2.43 goals against per game. Their special teams were clicking at a great rate, 36.8 power play percentage and an 87.5 penalty kill percentage. And go figure, their leading scorer after the first round, Connor McDavid, with 14 points in 7 games, so a 2 points per game average for McDavid after the first round. And Evander Kane also 7 goals in 7 games, 9 total points. He had a great first round. And Leon Draisaitl also had 9 points. It'll be interesting to see if he can continue that production against Calgary, considering he's probably going to be playing the majority of the series on a bum ankle. Taking a look at the Calgary Flames now, they scored 2.14 goals per game in the first round against Dallas and allowed just 2 against per game, a very, very low scoring series. There's a positive and a negative when it comes to their special teams. The positive being they had a 91.7 penalty kill percentage against the Stars, but their power play clicked at just 8.3%, so I'm sure they're going to want to, get that up a little bit in this matchup against the Oilers. And their leading scorers after the first round are the players you would expect to be their leading scorers, Johnny Gaudreau Gaudreau with 8 points in 7 games, and Matthew Tkachuk with 6 in 7 games. Happy for Johnny Gaudreau, especially for him to get that overtime winner and really shed the narrative of him not being a playoff performer. Now, as far as my prediction goes for this series, if you watched my bracket challenge video where I did predictions for the entire playoffs all the way to the Stanley Cup final, you probably know where I'm going with this because I had these two teams meeting in the second round, and I'm going to stick with the same prediction that I had in that video, which is the Calgary Flames get this series done in 6 games. I just think Calgary has the much better complete team. I trust Jacob Markstrom a lot more than I trust Mike Smith. I fully expect Calgary to get a lot more going offensively in this series than they were able to get against Dallas. I think the Draisaitl ankle injury could play a factor here as well, depending on how serious that is. If he's not the dominant offensive force that we know him to be, then that's obviously going to make things a lot tougher for Edmonton. So I'm taking the Calgary Flames to win this in 6 games. However, I would not mind being wrong at all and seeing it go the distance, seeing it go 7 games, because this is just a matchup I don't think anyone can get tired of watching. Moving on over to the Eastern Conference now, starting off with the Battle of Florida, the Tampa Bay Lightning against the Florida Panthers, a rematch of last year's first round where the Lightning were able to knock off the Panthers in 6 games. Neither of these teams had it easy in the first round. The Tampa Bay Lightning went the distance with the Toronto Maple Leafs, defeated them in 7 games, and the Florida Panthers defeated the Washington Capitals in 6 games. That series was a lot tougher for Florida than I expected it to be. First off, let's take a look at the Tampa Bay Lightning's numbers after their first round matchup against Toronto. They scored 3.29 goals per game and allowed 3.43 goals against per game. The fact that they have a higher goals against per game number than goals for per game number after the first round, even though they won, should tell you everything you need to know about that series. It was neck and neck the whole way. Their special teams performed well in the first round, a 21.2 power play percentage and an 85.7 penalty kill percentage. Their leading scorer was Nikita Kucherov with 8 points in 7 games, and then Victor Hedman, who had 7 points in 7 games. Moving on over to the Panthers now, they scored 3.33 goals per game against Washington and allowed 3.17 goals against per game. Their special teams did not do them any favors, probably a big reason why this series was closer than some people expected it to be. A 0 power play percentage. They literally didn't score a power play goal in the 6 games, and their penalty kill percentage just 70.8. If they have similar special teams in this second round matchup against Tampa Bay that they had in the first round against Washington, I don't think they stand a chance, because if I had to guess, I think there's probably going to be a lot of penalties in this series, considering the way these two teams played each other in the playoffs last year and also in the regular season this year, and even the preseason there was like a huge brawl between these two teams. The Panthers' leading scorers after the first round, a little bit surprising here. Carter Verhaeghe with 6 goals and 6 assists, 12 points in 6 games. He is definitely a early Conn Smythe candidate for them. And then also Claude Giroux had 7 points in 6 games. This series is going to be great. In terms of my prediction, I honestly went back and forth on this one. In the end, I decided to go with the Tampa Bay Lightning winning this series, but I think it's going to take them 7 games. And my reasoning for that is pretty simple. The Tampa Bay Lightning impressed the hell out of me in the first round against the Toronto Maple Leafs, and the Florida Panthers, on the other hand, I wasn't a huge fan of what I saw from them. Even though they won in 6 games, there was a point in that series where they had their goaltender pulled down a goal late in the third period and potentially were about to go down 3-1 in the series, but obviously they were able to tie it up late and then win that game in overtime. That series was really a lot closer than just a 6-game series. It could have gone either way. Similar to what I said about the goaltending in the Calgary-Edmonton series, I obviously trust Vasilevsky in a playoff series a lot more than Sergei Bobrovsky. I won't lie to you, I want to be wrong on this prediction because I want the Florida Panthers to win. I'm not a Tampa Bay Lightning hater. I mean, we've seen them win the last 2 Stanley Cups, right? I want to see some fresh new teams, get into the Final Four. It will be interesting to see what the scoop is on Braden Point. He suffered an injury in Game 7 against Toronto, stayed on the bench, tried to play, but just wasn't able to, so I'm interested to see if he's going to be in the lineup for Game 1, if he's going to miss, an extended period of time in this series, because obviously that could play a factor. But the Tampa Bay Lightning have shown time and time again that without one of their star players, they are still a very, very dominant team. They literally won the Stanley Cup, their first of 2 Stanley Cups, without their captain Steven Stamkos playing in the playoffs. He only played, 14 minutes? Moving on now to the final semifinal matchup we have to talk about in this video, the New York Rangers against the Carolina Hurricanes. So I believe this is actually a rematch from the qualifying round from the bubble in 2020, which was a best-of-5 series that the Carolina Hurricanes won 3-0, sweeping the Rangers and advancing, but obviously New York is a much, much better team now than they were then. Each of these teams went the distance in round 1. The New York Rangers took 7 games to knock off the Pittsburgh Penguins, actually coming back from a 3-1 series deficit, and the Carolina Hurricanes defeated Boston in 7 as well. Looking at the Rangers' numbers first, in their first round matchup against the Penguins, they averaged 4 goals per game and 4.14 goals against against per game. So again, more goals against per game than goals for per game. That should just show you how close that series really was. Game 7 overtime, can't get any closer than that. Their special teams were very solid, a 31.6 power play percentage. Their Game 7 overtime winner by Panarin actually came on the power play, and they had just a 73.9 penalty kill percentage. And their leading scorers in that 7-game series, Mika Zibanejad, who came up big with 3 goals, 8 assists, 11 points in 7 games, and Adam Fox with 10 points. Taking a look at the Canes now, they scored 3.43 goals per game against Boston in those 7 games, allowed just 2.86 goals against per game. Special teams wasn't really a strong point for them in that series, just a 13.9 power play percentage and a 79.3 penalty kill percentage. I'm sure they're going to want to improve in those areas in this series against New York. And the Canes' leading scorers after round 1, a couple of defensemen, Jacob Slavin and Tony DeAngelo, both with 8 points apiece. That's another interesting storyline heading into this series. Tony DeAngelo going up against his former team. Obviously, with the way things ended there, I'm sure there's still some bad blood there between a few players. I'm honestly pretty excited to see if any of that spoils over into the games. I'm guessing it will. This is another series that I kind of went back and forth on, like Tampa Bay versus Florida. In the end, my prediction, I'm going to go with the Carolina Hurricanes to win this series, but I'm going to say it takes them 7 games. One of the big reasons why I took Boston actually to knock out Carolina in the first round in my original bracket, I said Boston in 7, was because Freddie Anderson wasn't expected to play, and although Antti Raanta was solid for them in the regular season, Freddie Anderson was literally one of the best goalies in the league this year, so anytime you take that off your roster, you should see a downgrade in that position. But not only did Antti Raanta prove that he can be good enough for Carolina to win a series, he proved that he can be great and be one of the big reasons why they were able to knock off Boston. And on the other hand, Igor Shesterkin, even though he's likely going to win the Vezina, was nominated for the Hart, he looked human at a lot of points in that series against the Pittsburgh Penguins, had very subpar numbers. If that is the case again in round 2, then I fully expect Carolina to move on here, but again, this is one that really you can go back and forth on, and I would not be shocked at all if the Rangers are able to pull this out. I think it's going to be a fun series, whichever way it goes. But that is going to wrap up this video previewing and predicting the second round of the 2022 Stanley Cup playoffs. As always, I'm very intrigued to hear what you guys have to say. Let me know down below in the comment section who you get advancing and why. And while you're down there, if you could, please drop a like on the video. I'd really appreciate that. And if it was your first time checking out the channel and you want to see more NHL content just like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all soon.